Thanks so much for tuning in. I'm Ruben Kronig of Vineyard Time on Martha's Vineyard. And today I'd like to talk about Tiffany and Co. The Tiffany and Co retailer was founded in 1837 in New York City. And since then, they have become a huge powerhouse, one that people journey from all over the world to visit. Whether it's for engagement rings, whether it's for silver, or whether it's for watches, they have a large variety of top-notch handmade artifacts. And a lot of people associate Tiffany and Co. with one or two things. They associate them with silver, or they associate them with engagement rings. But Tiffany and Co. is both a manufacturer and a retailer. And today I want to talk about their involvement with watches. Tiffany and Co. retailed a whole variety of brands, top-notch brands, in the watch world. They also were involved in producing or private labeling a variety of watch models throughout their history. What's interesting about the Tiffany and Co. involvement in the watch world is that they were able to partner with and put their brand name co-branded on a whole variety of very famous high-grade watches, including Rolex, including Patek Philippe. And those partnerships were very interesting arrangements. When you look at watches today and you look at retailers, many people pick the watch, not necessarily the retailer. So they're looking for the best deal they can get on the same model, or they're looking for which location is closest. But historically, there was much fewer retailers, there wasn't the online presence, and there was a lot of retail loyalty. And Tiffany & Co. was one of those special brands that a lot of families went to for their heirloom creations, whether they were jewelry, whether they were watches. And all of these brands in the 1800s into the 1900s were coming up together. They weren't the same world-renowned brands that they are today. They were much younger. So a lot of these brands, like Patek Philippe, were willing and open to co-branding these styles. Now, what does that mean today? What it means in the collector's market is that there are a lot of very interesting co-branded watches that feature the retailer's names. So for instance, you might find a Patek Philippe watch with an original Tiffany & Co stamp. Or you might find a Rolex with an original Tiffany & Co stamp. Or you might find a watch that is simply Tiffany & Co. That watch still may have been produced by Patek Philippe, or it might have been produced by a Tiffany & Co company. So there's some distinction between what you're looking at, and it's important to sort of understand the variety. Tiffany & Co stamped their name on a whole variety of products. They put their name on Bulova Accutron watches. They put their name on Omega watches. They put their name on Patek watches and Rolex watches, and a whole variety of brands. So they're not created equal. That's interesting from a collector perspective because it means you have the opportunity to pick up a less expensive version of a Tiffany & Co watch or a very rare variant of a Tiffany & Co watch. What's important to understand is that Tiffany & Co has become such a brand and identity in its own right that oftentimes these co-branded watches that feature the retailer's names actually carry a premium at auction. So for instance, if you have an Omega with a Tiffany & Co stamp, you should expect to see that watch go for a premium over the same Omega without a Tiffany & Co stamp. That's sort of an interesting dynamic because today we often don't think about which store we bought the watch from. We just think about which watch and which brand and which model we've purchased. So that's an interesting dynamic to explore. It's also important to note when you're looking at the incredible variety of Tiffany & Co watches that there are fakes. Whenever there's a market for a higher end premium price associated with a minor adjustment in dial, you do have to be aware that sometimes unscrupulous individuals will try to add a stamp or refinish the dial. Anytime you see a refinished dial, or they even tell you it's a refinished dial, and then it features an extra stamp, like a Tiffany & Co stamp, you should be suspicious. That doesn't mean it isn't correct, but you should be suspicious because that's one of the only defining parts that would have identified it as being a Tiffany and Co watch versus just the regular model without the Tiffany and Co branding. It's also one of those things that you should be watching out for whenever you're buying a vintage watch, and to ensure that the dials have not been redone. And if they have been redone, you should be paying a reduced price for that. Hopefully the dealer will be honest enough to tell you that. You can also look close to try to see if anything looks out of alignment. Does the writing look like it's done by hand? Do the numbers not quite line up? Do the hash marks not quite line up? Is it the same watch style that you'd see if it was on another retailer? Looking at some of those close details can give you some clues as to whether that dial is correct. What I would say is that if you're interested in getting a Tiffany and Co branded dial, you should look around for a while. You should also try to look for watches that might be single owner watches or watches that might have a fairly direct lineage. That'll give you a little bit more comfort in what you're buying. That said, there's a whole variety of models that feature that stamp that are interesting to look at, and it's a whole nother subset of collecting for you to explore. Thanks so much for tuning in. I really hope you enjoyed this week's content. We'll have more content for you weekly. Please feel free to leave any comments below. We'll try to respond to them as quickly as possible. Reach out in the below section with any questions, and please hit the subscribe button. Thanks so much. We really appreciate your time. Have a nice day.